My name is Jessica, I'm 28 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've always prided myself on being a good friend, a supportive partner, and someone who can always be counted on. But everything started to crumble the day my boyfriend, Caleb, proposed to me. No, scratch that, everything really started spiraling the day my best friend, Emily, stopped speaking to me afterward. Let me give you some background. Caleb is 32, a successful lawyer with a sharp mind and an even sharper jawline. He had always been my rock, steady, reliable, charming, everything I could ask for in a man. And then there's Emily, my best friend since college, who I considered a sister. She's 30, an ambitious marketing executive, with a beauty that turned heads and a wit that could leave anyone speechless. We've been through thick and thin together, sharing everything from the best moments to the most heartbreaking ones. When Caleb proposed to me, it was everything I dreamed of. The ring was beautiful, the moment was perfect, and I was on cloud 9. There was only one problem. Emily didn't seem as thrilled. In fact, her reaction was downright strange. She seemed happy at first, but then her smile quickly faded. I brushed it off as nothing. Maybe she was just tired, or maybe she was feeling a little left out because we were about to embark on this new chapter without her. After all, she had been single 4 years, and we had always joked about how she was the forever single one. But still, I could tell something wasn't right. Then came the following week. We were all supposed to meet up for dinner, Caleb, Emily, and me. Caleb had made reservations at this fancy restaurant we all loved, and I was excited to celebrate with them both. When I arrived at the restaurant, I found Emily already seated, and Caleb was running late. Emily was scrolling through her phone, but her posture was stiff, her eyes glued to the screen, and she barely looked up when I sat down. I greeted her, but she only nodded in return, a far cry from her usual bubbly self. "Is everything okay?" I asked, a slight unease growing in my chest. She shrugged, barely meeting my gaze. "Yeah, just tired, I guess." But the way she said it made me feel like there was something more going on. I let it slide for the moment, but my gut told me that something wasn't right. Caleb finally arrived, and as we sat down to eat, things were off. Emily was distant, barely engaging in the conversation. Her usual witty remarks were replaced by one-word answers, and every time I looked at her, she seemed to be lost in thought. I tried to ignore the unease building inside of me, but when Caleb reached for my hand under the table, I couldn't help but notice that Emily's eyes narrowed slightly. It was subtle, but it was there. When dinner was over, Emily said she had to leave early because of work, which wasn't unusual for her. But she didn't hug me goodbye like she usually did. She didn't even say "see you later." It felt cold, almost like she was running away from something. I was confused but didn't press her. I figured maybe she just needed some space. But that night would change everything. Around midnight, I received a text from Emily. It was cryptic and short. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. You have no idea what's been going on behind your back." I immediately felt a pit form in my stomach. What could she possibly mean by that? The next day, I tried calling her, but she ignored my calls. Then, finally, she texted me again. "I'll be at the park at 4 p.m. Come alone." I didn't know what to think. My mind raced through a million scenarios, none of them good. I thought maybe she was upset about something that had happened between us, maybe something I had done. So, I decided to go to the park, hoping for the best but bracing for the worst. When I arrived, I found Emily sitting on a bench, her face pale and strained. Her usual calm demeanor was gone. She didn't even look up as I approached. "Emily, what's going on?" "What do you mean, behind my back?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. She let out a shaky breath, and for a moment, I thought she might not say anything. But then, she turned to me, her eyes filled with regret. "I don't know how to say this, Jessica," she started. "But Caleb, he's been seeing someone else. For months. He asked me not to tell you." I froze. My heart stopped, and for a moment, the world around me blurred. I couldn't process her words. "What do you mean, he's seeing someone else?" I repeated, trying to make sense of it. "How do you know this?" "I found out by accident," Emily said, her voice shaking. I thought he was just talking to a woman for work, but then I saw them together, at his apartment, kissing." I stumbled back, clutching my chest as the pain in my heart intensified. My best friend, the one I trusted with everything, had just shattered my world. "Are you serious?" I whispered. Emily nodded solemnly, tears in her eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you, Jess, but you deserve to know. He's been lying to you this whole time. And it's worse than you think. It's been going on for longer than you realize." I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight with disbelief, and my vision swam with the sudden rush of emotions. Betrayal, anger, sadness. I had to leave. I couldn't even look at her anymore. But before I could walk away, Emily grabbed my wrist. I'm sorry, Jess, but there's more. Caleb isn't just cheating. He is planning on marrying her. He doesn't love you anymore. I just thought you should know. I couldn't believe it. My mind raced, my thoughts were a jumbled mess. How could he do this to me, to us? I didn't want to hear any more. I pulled my arm free and walked away, tears streaming down my face. My best friend had just ruined my entire life, and I didn't even know how to begin to pick up the pieces. That night, Caleb came home late, as usual. I didn't confront him right away. I wanted to see how he'd act, how long he would keep up the charade. I needed to hear it from his mouth. But the moment he walked in, I could tell something was different. His eyes avoided mine. He didn't kiss me like he always did, didn't even say hello. Caleb, I whispered, my voice steady but full of fear. Are you seeing someone else? He didn't answer immediately, and in that silence, I knew the truth. I felt the weight of betrayal sinking in like 1,000 bricks. Who is she? I asked, my voice breaking. He looked at me, and I saw it in his eyes, the guilt, the shame. He didn't even try to deny it. I'm sorry, Jess, he said quietly, his voice hollow. It's over. I've been seeing someone else, and I'm in love with her. The floor beneath me gave way. My world had just shattered, but I wasn't about to fall apart. Not yet. I would deal with this, on my own terms. But there was something else Emily had said, something about Caleb planning to marry her. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just going to let this slide. No, I was going to make Caleb regret ever betraying me. The next few days were a blur of anger, pain, and confusion. I went through the motions, pretending to go to work, sitting through meetings, texting friends, doing everything I could to avoid dealing with Caleb and the wreckage of our life together. But every time I tried to focus on something else, it came back to me, the betrayal. His cold words echoed in my mind. I'm in love with her. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How could he? Caleb was supposed to be the man I spent my life with. We had built a future together, and now, it was all coming crashing down because of her. The woman who had somehow stolen my fiancé's heart, my life, my everything. Who was she? How had he been so secretive about it? How long had this been going on? I needed answers, and I was determined to get them. But I couldn't focus on that immediately. No, first, I had to confront Emily. I couldn't understand why she'd kept quiet about this for so long. She knew what Caleb was doing behind my back, and yet, she hadn't said a word until now. She knew that he was planning to marry the other woman. I needed to know why. Why hadn't she told me sooner? I called her again, but this time, I wasn't asking her to meet me. No, I needed to confront her in person. I needed to look into her eyes and understand what had driven her to withhold this truth from me. I felt my blood boil as I dialed her number. Emily, we need to talk. I'm coming over, I said, my voice steely with the venom of betrayal. Jessica, she started to say, but I cut her off. Now, Emily, I'll be at your place in an hour, and don't even think about running. She didn't say anything else, and I knew she was just as rattled as I was. I don't know why, but deep down, I wasn't just angry at Caleb anymore. I was angry at her, the woman I had trusted more than anyone. I had never imagined she would do something like this to me. But that's the thing with betrayal, right? It makes you question everything you thought you knew. When I arrived at her apartment, I didn't even knock. I barged straight in, my mind racing, my heart pounding. Emily was sitting on the couch, her face pale and tired. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. When she saw me, she flinched, but she didn't move. She didn't try to run this time. She just waited for me to speak. You've got some explaining to do, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. Jessica, she started, but I didn't let her finish. I was past being polite. I needed the truth, and I needed it now. Why didn't you tell me? I spat. Why didn't you say something when you knew Caleb was cheating on me? You're supposed to be my best friend, Emily. You were supposed to have my back. She winced, but then she took a deep breath and met my gaze. I never wanted to hurt you, Jess. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought it would be easier if you figured it out on your own. I didn't want to destroy everything. Everything? You already destroyed everything, Emily. The thought lingered, but I bit it back. So, what? You thought it would just magically get better? I pressed. You thought I'd be okay with this? I didn't want to be the one to break it to you, she said quietly, almost in a whisper. It's not like I didn't care, but then I found out something else. Something about Caleb. Something I should have told you a long time ago. What? I froze. She hadn't said this before. This was new information. Something else. What was worse than the fact that my fiancé had been seeing another woman behind my back 4 months? What else, Emily? Her voice faltered. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to hate me, but I think you need to know. Caleb has been planning on proposing to her, and he's already asked her family for their blessing. I felt the floor drop beneath me. This wasn't real. It can't be. He's planning on marrying her? I repeated, my voice rising with shock. Is that why he told me he was in love with her? Is that why? Jess, I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. I really should have. Why didn't you? I demanded, stepping closer, my face burning with a mixture of humiliation and rage. Why did you wait until he was about to marry her? Why didn't you tell me when you first found out? When did it start? Was it right from the beginning? Emily looked down at her hands, avoiding my gaze. I don't know, Jess. He said he was confused, that he wanted to end things with her, but I don't think he ever really did. I felt like I was suffocating. Caleb had been planning this for so long, and he never once gave me a hint. It was all just a game to him, wasn't it? And all this time, I'd been thinking we were building a life together. I don't care about the excuses, Emily, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You knew about all this, and you said nothing. You let him get away with it. You let me stay in the dark. I know, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I'm sorry, Jess, I really am. But now it's too late. He's already gone, and I'm afraid you've lost him for good. That's when it hit me. Emily wasn't just warning me anymore, she was accepting it. She was accepting that Caleb had moved on, and I was the one left picking up the broken pieces. But I wasn't going to let this be the end of the story. I wasn't going to let this cowardly bastard and my traitorous best friend walk away unscathed. I took a step back, my hand shaking with anger. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here and let this happen. Not after everything he'd done, not after everything she'd done. You know what, Emily? I'm done with this, I said, my words cutting like a knife. You've made your choice, and I've made mine. I'll never forgive you for this. I turned on my heel and left her apartment, the weight of the betrayal hanging heavily on my chest. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for sure: Caleb and Emily weren't going to get away with this. Not without consequences. And I was going to make sure they felt every bit of the pain they'd caused me. Little did they know, I wasn't going down without a fight. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and calculating thoughts. I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't allow Caleb to get away with treating me like this. I wasn't some naive fool he could toss aside when things got difficult. And Emily, my best friend, had shown her true colors. Her betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. I had trusted her with everything, and she had allowed my fiancé to destroy me from the inside out. But now, it was my turn. I was done with being the victim. I was done with just sitting back and letting everything happen to me. It was time to take control, to turn the tables, and make Caleb and Emily feel the same pain and humiliation I had felt. I had to make them regret what they'd done, every single moment of it. I knew that revenge wasn't going to be easy. It never is. But I also knew that I had to be smart about it. It couldn't be impulsive. It couldn't be messy. No, this needed to be calculated. It needed to be perfect. And, above all, it needed to be something that would make Caleb regret his choices for the rest of his life. The first part of my plan was simple enough: get close to Emily again. I hated the idea, but I knew that to make this work, I had to get back in her good graces. She was going to be my inside source. She thought I was done with her, that I had written her off completely, and to be fair, I had, but I wasn't stupid. I could still use her. If I could get her to open up, to spill details about Caleb's plans, his interactions with his family, and, most importantly, his financial situation, I'd have the ammunition I needed. So, I reached out to Emily. I hated that I had to. I hated that I had to pretend I was okay, that I wasn't planning to tear her and Caleb's lives apart. But I played my part, as if I hadn't just found out the most devastating news of my life. We met at a cafe, the kind of place we used to frequent for girl talk. I could barely stomach it, but I had to maintain the illusion that I was still the same Jessica, the girl who trusted Emily with everything. She looked different. Her eyes were still redrimmed, her face weary. I could tell she was struggling with her own guilt. She hadn't seen me this angry before, and I wasn't sure if she knew what to expect from me. Jessica, Emily's voice trembled as she greeted me. I forced a smile and nodded, trying to seem more at ease than I felt. I wasn't going to let her see how much I was hurting. No, I had to be strong. Strong for the next part of my plan. Emily, I replied coolly, sliding into the booth across from her. I've been thinking about what you said. I know you didn't mean for this to happen, but you've got to help me now. I need you to tell me everything you know about Caleb, what he's been doing, his plans. I'm going to make sure he doesn't get away with this." She swallowed hard, her gaze flickering nervously between mine. She was starting to see the change in me. She was starting to understand that I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't the Jessica she used to know. I was someone else now, someone who had been hurt too deeply to stay quiet. Someone who would make sure Caleb and Emily both paid the price for what they'd done. I don't know if I can do that," Emily said softly, looking down at her hands. Her voice was barely a whisper, full of guilt and regret. "You know how he is. He's always been so good at getting people on his side, Jessica. He's convinced his family that everything's fine. He's telling them you two just weren't working out. They think you're the one who messed everything up. And, I prompted, leaning in slightly, my voice tight with impatience. "And he's been buying things," she added, her eyes avoiding mine. "Big purchases, expensive things. I overheard him talking about putting down money for a house, an actual house, Jessica. Not just a condo or a place to rent. A home." I froze. A house. He was planning to buy a house with her. The thought of him starting a life with her, of him moving on so easily, so carelessly, made my blood boil. But it also gave me an idea. A perfect idea. "Tell me more," I urged, controlling my breath. "What else has he been up to? What's he really been saying?" Emily shifted uncomfortably but finally spoke. "He's been telling people you two just didn't get along. That you were too controlling, too demanding. He says he's finally free. That he's in love with her." I didn't want to believe it, but it's all true. He's been leading a double life. And I couldn't say anything. I let her words sink in. The more I heard, the more I realized just how deep Caleb's lies ran. He had built a whole new life, a whole new future with this woman. And now, I had a plan to destroy that future, piece by piece. Once I had enough of Emily's useless apologies and half-hearted explanations, I let the silence stretch between us. I wasn't interested in hearing any more of her excuses. She had given me all the information I needed, and now, it was time to act. The first step of my plan was to use Caleb's own family against him. He thought he could walk away from me and start fresh with her, but I knew better. I knew his family, his parents, especially, had always been a little too invested in our relationship. They'd loved me like a daughter. I had to make sure they saw what kind of man their son really was. I would show them everything, his lies, his betrayal, his plans to move on without a second thought. I started gathering evidence, old text messages, photos, social media posts, anything I could find that would prove Caleb had been seeing someone else long before he admitted it to me. And then, I would take it to his family. I knew they'd believe me, and when they saw the truth, they wouldn't let him get away with it. But that wasn't enough. I needed to hit him where it hurt the most, his finances. Emily had mentioned the house, the big purchases. I had no doubt that Caleb had been pouring money into this new life with her. He had been so sure that I wouldn't fight back, so confident that he could just walk away. But he was wrong. I started looking into his finances, contacting a few people I knew who could help me get access to his accounts. It wasn't hard. Caleb had always been careless with his money. I knew his passwords, his favorite hangouts, and his weak spots. I would drain his accounts, lock him out of his assets, and make sure that his precious new life came crashing down, just like mine had. Finally, there was the woman herself. The one who had so callously inserted herself into my life. I knew her name now. I knew where she worked. I would expose her to everyone she knew, showing them exactly who she was. I would make sure her reputation suffered as badly as mine had. And Emily? I didn't know what I was going to do with her yet. But I knew one thing for sure: she was going to feel the consequences of her betrayal. I didn't need her in my life anymore, but I'd make sure she understood what happens when you destroy a friendship for a man who isn't worth it. This was just the beginning. My revenge would be slow, calculated, and painful. Caleb and Emily would both pay for everything they'd done. And when it was all over, they would regret the day they ever crossed me. The day my plan came to life was the day everything shifted. It wasn't enough to break Caleb and Emily apart emotionally. I wanted to watch their perfect little world crumble under the weight of their own selfishness. They thought they could walk all over me, humiliate me, and move on without consequence. They had no idea what was coming. It all started with Caleb's company gala, the annual event where he got to parade around like he was the king of the world. This year, the stakes were higher than ever. His promotion to senior project manager was on the line. He had been working overtime for weeks, prepping presentations, networking, and making sure his reputation was spotless. And Emily, of course, was planning to attend as his date. I knew this would be the perfect stage for my revenge. After all, what better way to expose two liars than in front of an audience filled with their colleagues, bosses, and peers? The setup. I arrived at the gala early, dressed to the nines in a stunning emerald green gown that hugged my figure perfectly. I knew Caleb would notice me the second I walked in. He always loved green on me, it was my color, he used to say. I wanted him to see what he had thrown away, to feel that pang of regret before everything unraveled. I wasn't there alone. Over the past few weeks, I had been working closely with a private investigator I hired to dig up dirt on Caleb and Emily. I had photos, videos, and text exchanges all neatly compiled into a slideshow presentation. And tonight, that presentation was going to make its grand debut. But the pièce de résistance? I had reached out to Emily's ex-boyfriend, Ryan, who had been unceremoniously dumped when she started her affair with Caleb. Turns out, Ryan was more than willing to help me out. He would be my +1 for the evening, adding an extra layer of discomfort for Emily when she spotted him. The event begins. As the room filled with people, I watched Caleb and Emily arrive together. Caleb was wearing his tailored navy suit, the one I had picked out for him years ago. Emily, on the other hand, looked like she was trying too hard. Her bright red dress screamed "Look at me," but it only made her look desperate. When Caleb spotted me, his jaw clenched. I saw him nudge Emily, whispering something in her ear. She turned to look at me, and her expression froze. Perfect. I made my rounds, chatting with Caleb's colleagues and casually dropping hints about our breakup. "Oh, we're not together anymore," I'd say with a sweet smile. "Let's just say Caleb has other priorities these days." People ate it up, their curiosity piqued. As the night went on, Caleb's unease grew. I could see him glancing my way every few minutes, his grip on Emily's arm tightening. He knew something was off, but he didn't know what. The big reveal. When the time came for Caleb to give his presentation, I made my move. As he stood on stage, talking about team leadership and integrity, I slipped away to the AV booth. The technician there was already in on my plan. I had paid him handsomely to ensure everything went smoothly. Just as Caleb was wrapping up his speech, the projector screen behind him flickered to life. At first, it showed a generic company logo. Then, one by one, the photos started to appear. The first was a picture of Caleb and Emily kissing in his car, timestamped during one of those late nights he had claimed to be working. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Caleb froze mid-sentence, his face draining of color. The next slide showed text messages between the two of them. Explicit messages. Messages where Caleb bragged about how easy it was to deceive me, how clueless I was. The room erupted into whispers and murmurs, people pulling out their phones to snap pictures of the screen. And then came the video. A short clip of Caleb and Emily entering a hotel room together, hand in hand. It played on a loop, the audio muted but the visuals damning enough. By the time the slideshow ended, the room was dead silent. Caleb looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Emily was clinging to his arm, her face pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I stepped forward then, standing at the edge of the stage. "Integrity, huh?" I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Is this what you meant by leading by example, Caleb?" The crowd erupted into chaos. Some people laughed, others whispered furiously. Caleb's boss, Mr. Reynolds, looked furious. He stormed up to the stage, yanking the microphone from Caleb's hand. "Office affairs are strictly against company policy," Mr. Reynolds barked. "Caleb, we'll discuss this first thing Monday morning. Emily, I expect to see you in HR." Emily's breakdown. As Caleb and Emily tried to leave, Ryan and I intercepted them. Emily's eyes widened when she saw Ryan, and for a moment, she looked genuinely terrified. "You didn't think I'd miss this, did you?" Ryan said, smirking. "You've got quite the track record, Emily. First me, now Caleb. What's next? The janitor?" Emily snapped. "You're pathetic," she screamed, her voice shrill. "This is a witch hunt. You're just jealous of what Caleb and I have." "Jealous?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You're welcome to him, Emily, but good luck building a future with someone who just lost his promotion, his savings, and his reputation." She turned to Caleb, her face crumpling. "What does she mean? What is she talking about?" Caleb avoided her gaze. I don't know what she's." "Oh, come on, Caleb," I interrupted. "You didn't think I'd let you buy that house, did you? I drained the account months ago. And your credit? Let's just say you'll have a hard time financing a pack of gum." Emily's face twisted in rage. She slapped Caleb hard enough to echo through the room, then stormed out, leaving him standing there like a broken man. The fallout. By the end of the night, Caleb was a shell of himself. His colleagues avoided him like the plague, and his boss had all but fired him on the spot. Emily's meltdown had been the final nail in the coffin. As I left the gala, Ryan by my side, I felt a sense of satisfaction I hadn't felt in months. They thought they could humiliate me, but in the end, they were the ones left in ruins. But the best part? This was only the beginning. The aftermath would be even sweeter. The aftermath of my revenge unfolded like the final act of a tragic play, one where I had written every line, set every scene, and orchestrated every downfall. Caleb and Emily thought their betrayal was a private affair, something they could sweep under the rug while I faded into obscurity. But now, their lives were in shambles, and I was ready to watch it all unravel from a front row seat. Caleb's descent. The Monday after the gala, Caleb showed up at his office, still clinging to some shred of hope that he could salvage his career. It didn't take long for reality to hit. His boss, Mr. Reynolds, wasted no time in suspending him pending further investigation. The company had a zero-tolerance policy for workplace affairs, and the evidence I provided was more than enough to seal his fate. By the end of the week, Caleb was officially terminated. The news spread like wildfire through his industry, leaving him effectively blacklisted. His once bright future was now a collection of closed doors and burned bridges. But that wasn't the worst of it. Remember the joint account Caleb had drained to impress Emily? He hadn't realized I'd moved most of the money into a private account weeks before. The little that was left had been frozen as part of our divorce proceedings. He was broke, unemployed, and drowning in debt. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Caleb moved back in with his parents, retreating to the small, cluttered room he'd grown up in. The image of him sitting on that twin-sized bed, staring at the wreckage of his life, brought a twisted sense of satisfaction. Emily's downfall. Emily didn't fare much better. After the gala, she became the subject of office gossip, her reputation obliterated. HR called her in for an exit interview, which was just a polite way of firing her. With no job and no Caleb to support her, she quickly found herself spiraling. Ryan, my unexpected ally in this revenge saga, stayed in touch with me long enough to deliver updates on Emily. Apparently, she tried reaching out to him, hoping to rekindle their old relationship. He turned her down flat, calling her out for the manipulative, self-serving person she was. From what I've heard, Emily now works as a server at a diner on the outskirts of town, far from the glamorous life she once envisioned. She's still trying to keep up appearances on social media, but the cracks in her facade are obvious. The unexpected twist. Here's where things got even more outrageous. Caleb and Emily turned on each other. A few weeks after the gala, I received an anonymous tip. Caleb had filed a small claims case against Emily, accusing her of fraud. Apparently, she had convinced him to loan her money during their affair, promising to pay it back once they started their new life together. Caleb, ever the gullible fool, gave her thousands of dollars, only to realize after their fallout that she had no intention of repaying him. Emily, in turn, accused Caleb of emotionally manipulating her and threatened to expose more dirt about him to his professional network. The two of them dragged each other through the mud in court, each desperate to destroy the other in a last-ditch effort to regain some sense of power. I didn't attend the hearings. I didn't need to. I already knew how it would end, with both of them humiliated and empty-handed. My new beginning. As for me, I was thriving. After the divorce was finalized, I sold the house. It wasn't easy to let go of the place I once called home, but I realized it wasn't the walls or the furniture that mattered, it was the freedom I gained by leaving it behind. With the proceeds from the sale and the money I had secured in my private account, I moved to a beautiful loft apartment in the city, a space that was entirely my own. I threw myself into my work, earning a promotion at the marketing firm where I'd been employed 4 years. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my life again. I also started therapy. It was hard at first, unpacking all the pain and betrayal I'd endured, but it helped me rediscover who I was outside of my marriage. I realized that Caleb's infidelity didn't define me, it defined him. And then there was Ryan. We stayed in touch after the gala, and over time, our casual conversations turned into something more. He understood what I had been through, and he respected my strength and resilience. We started dating a few months later, and while I wasn't rushing into anything, it felt good to be with someone who valued honesty and loyalty. Caleb and Emily's final plea. The most ironic part, Caleb and Emily both tried to reach out to me. Caleb sent me a long, rambling email, apologizing for everything and asking if we could meet to talk things through. He claimed he had made a mistake and that losing me was the biggest regret of his life. Emily's approach was less subtle. She showed up at my office unannounced, tears streaming down her face as she begged me to forgive her. She said she had lost everything, her job, her reputation, and Caleb, and that she didn't know how to move on. I listened to both of them, not out of kindness, but out of curiosity, and then I told them the same thing: you made your bed, now lie in it. The final reflection: looking back, I don't regret a single thing. Caleb and Emily thought they could betray me without consequence, but I proved them wrong. They underestimated my strength, my intelligence, and my ability to fight back. Revenge didn't erase the pain they caused me, but it gave me closure. It allowed me to take control of my narrative and remind them and myself that I was never the victim they tried to make me out to be. Now, as I sit here in my beautiful apartment, sipping wine and planning a weekend getaway with Ryan, I can't help but smile. Caleb and Emily are a distant memory, a cautionary tale I tell myself when I need a reminder of how far I've come. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine, and for the first time in a long time, that's enough.